At the foot of the cold, mist-drenched mountain, where the wind carved its lonely songs into the rocks and the sky seemed to sit heavy upon the world, lived a poor yet resilient girl named Alina, a young woman hardened by struggle but softened by the kindness she never allowed life to take from her. And on that particular evening, as she climbed down the narrow path after collecting fallen firewood, she had no idea fate was preparing to rewrite her life in ways she could never have imagined. The sun was sinking behind the peaks, painting the world in amber and blue, when she suddenly heard a faint, broken groan from somewhere beyond the trail, a sound that did not belong to any mountain animal she knew, and though fear prickled beneath her skin, something stronger, her instinct to help, pushed her forward through the snow until she saw him, a man lying half buried in frost and dirt, his coat torn, his shirt soaked with blood, his breath shallow enough to scare death itself, and without wasting a second she dropped to her knees beside him, brushing his snow-covered hair aside as she whispered, "Sir, can you hear me?" But the man could barely keep his eyes open, his lips trembling with pain as he tried to speak, though no words came out, so she quickly checked his pulse, relieved to find it still beating despite how weak it felt, and with trembling hands she scanned the area, realizing he must have fallen from the rocky ledges above, with the weight of survival pressing on her tiny frame. She tugged his arm over her shoulder and tried lifting him, but he was far heavier than she imagined, tall, muscular, and clearly not someone used to this mountain, judging by the expensive coat barely hanging from his body. Yet Alina refused to give up, digging her heels into the snow and pulling inch by inch until she managed to slide him across the ground, her breath burning in her chest, her arms aching, but something inside her insisting she keep going until she reached her small wooden hut at the base of the mountain. Inside, she dragged him onto her only bed, her heart racing with panic as she hurried to light her stove, boil water, and fetch her small metal box of herbal remedies her mother had left behind before she passed away, and with trembling but determined fingers, Alina cleaned the man's wounds one by one, wiping away dried blood, wrapping his ribs, whispering encouragement even though he was barely conscious, telling him he wasn't alone and he wasn't going to die tonight, not as long as she was there. For hours she worked on him, every second drenched in fear, until his breathing finally steadied, his body warming under the blankets she piled over him. And though exhaustion pulled heavily at her, she sat beside him all night, watching him with equal parts worry and curiosity. Who was he, dressed in clothes far too costly for these mountains, wearing a watch worth more than everything she ever owned combined, and why had he been alone in such a dangerous area? But answers would have to wait, because morning broke with a soft, pale light, and the man finally stirred, blinking against the glow as his eyes slowly focused on her, and for a moment, Alina froze, embarrassed by how she must look, messy hair, worn clothes, hands stained with salve and herbs, yet his gaze held no judgment, only confusion and something she wasn't expecting. "Gratitude, you saved me," he whispered, voice rough but sincere, and she nodded shyly, brushing her hair behind her ear as she muttered that she had only done what anyone would do, though deep down she knew that wasn't true, because in a place where people barely had enough for themselves, kindness was a luxury many couldn't afford, but she had given it without hesitation. The man struggled to sit up, wincing from the pain in his ribs, and Alina gently helped him, urging him to rest, but he stubbornly insisted he needed to check something, reaching for his coat pocket, only to find it empty. Panic flared in his eyes until Alina revealed she had found a sleek, black phone in the snow earlier, but it was completely shattered, and the man exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair in frustration, whispering something about urgent meetings and people waiting for him. But Alina simply reminded him that none of that mattered if he didn't survive, and something about her calm, grounded voice made him pause, breathing deeply as if realizing she was right. Over the next several hours, she fed him warm soup, changed his bandages, helped him walk slowly across the small hut to stretch his legs, and as the day passed, they talked about her life in the mountains, about how she worked odd jobs in the village, how she'd lost her parents too young, how she dreamed of one day escaping poverty but had no idea how, yet still smiled every morning because, as she put it, "God hasn't forgotten me yet." And the man listened more intently than she expected a stranger to, nodding with quiet admiration, though he still hadn't told her his name, not until she asked directly, and for a heartbeat, he hesitated before finally saying, "Adam," a simple name, far too simple to reveal who he truly was. Adam Sterling, one of the world's youngest billionaires, owner of tech empires, investment groups, and companies Alina had never even heard of, but he didn't tell her, afraid of how she might change around him, afraid she might start treating him differently or fear him, and for the first time in years, Adam felt something unfamiliar, comfort, something he hadn't felt even in luxury penthouses or boardrooms lined with glass. He saw the sincerity in Alina's eyes, the way she spoke with honesty instead of agenda, the way she gave without expecting anything in return, and it shook him more than the fall itself, because people in his world only acted kind when they wanted something. But this mountain girl helped because her heart told her to, and he realized how rare that was. As the days passed and his strength returned, Adam couldn't stop watching her, how she hummed while cooking, how she wrapped a scarf around her neck before stepping out into the freezing morning, how she looked at the world with hope despite having so little, and every small detail carved deeper into him, until he found himself wanting to stay longer even though he knew he shouldn't. Meanwhile, Alina tried to hide the fluttering in her chest whenever he smiled at her, confused by the warmth building inside her for a man she believed was simply a traveler who had lost his way, a man far too handsome, too gentle, too mysterious to be ordinary, and though she scolded herself for feeling anything, she couldn't deny the strange pull she felt whenever their eyes met. On the fifth morning, as Adam stood outside the hut staring at the mountain peaks, he finally decided it was time to return to his world, time to face the responsibilities he had abandoned the moment he collapsed. But he also knew he couldn't disappear without telling Alina the truth, without giving her something more than a thank you, so he walked back inside, his heart pounding harder than it ever did in front of shareholders, and said softly, "Alina, I need to tell you who I really am." And as she turned toward him with confusion in her eyes, he took a deep breath, ready to reveal the truth that would shake her world forever, a truth that would pull her from the shadows of poverty into a life she never believed she deserved. But before he spoke, before he changed everything, he looked at her one last time as she was, pure, honest, unfiltered, and whispered her name like a promise. What happens next will change her destiny, and if you want to see how this incredible journey of fate, love, and transformation unfolds, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next chapter of this extraordinary story.